Hey, what's up, people? So, thanks again for joining. Hope you guys enjoyed Lab Day yesterday. Like I told you guys, a lot of these videos are high level. I leave the low level, in-depth, big terminology um, discussion, right, for the literature, and of course for the distinguished engineers that host at Cisco Live. Um, just doing this, of course, so I can, make it make sense in the most layman's terms as possible. Um, and of course, whenever you guys do go back and look at this video, and maybe you want to review it in the future, well, of course, when you're getting ready to take your CCNA, it makes sense whenever you look at this video, then go back to read the book. Okay. But where we left off at, we're still in chapter 6, but we are at the last part of chapter 6. Okay. So it was a long journey, and I do apologize for that sound. My dog is loving his new toy. I bought him a carrot, a squeaky toy carrot. So he's loving it right now. So you might hear a couple of those squeaks for a while. But we are coming on the last part of chapter 6. Okay. We talked about a lot of things, right, that were centered around system management, right? Basic switch management, right, to manage the system. Okay. The last thing that we need to talk about, right, is a couple of settings that are useful, right, that are useful not just in the lab, but in the production environment as well, right? So let's talk about it, right? Let's go ahead and just jump right in, right? You see the title of this slide is called History Buffer Commands, right? And you see the commands here, right? But what does all of that mean, right? So if Ryan, right, is configuring, right, I give him a task. I say, Ryan, you being the network administrator, I need you to configure all of these SVIs. I need you to enable remote access using SSH. I need you to create multiple VLANs, right, that will have where you enable IPv4, right? I can tell you to do all these things that we've talked about, right? But some of these commands are going to be repeated, okay? But the great thing about Cisco iOS, right, is that whenever you enter commands in the CLI, right, what the CPU, what the iOS does is that it saves a certain amount of commands in the history buffer, okay? And so the history buffer has those commands that you put in. You can retrieve it, right? You can retrieve it by just hitting the up arrow, right, on the CLI, right? And when you do that, Ryan will go ahead if Ryan is configuring the switch that I told him to configure. He sees some of the commands that he maybe put in before, make some modifications, and he's able to efficiently configure the switch, right? And that history buffer, it comes, I can't tell you how many times it's helped me, it still helps me to this day, right? And these commands that you see on the screen, right? They're related to the history buffer, right? And so let's say, right, um, we have somebody like Ryan, like you guys, that are network admins that are maybe studying for an exam, maybe configuring a switch for your job or what have you, right? And again, you're configuring so many things, right? If it's a Cisco device, you can go ahead and use the command show history, right? And what will that do, right? If you enter it in privilege exec mode, right? Not user mode, not global config mode, user exec mode. I'm sorry, privilege exec mode. What it's going to do, it's going to show you all the commands, right? That you've put in so far in the CLI, right? All in one bunch, right? You'll see what you have in your buffer so far if you put in the show history command. Okay. But let's say Ryan has, I mean, almost a day's worth of work to do on that switch, right? And maybe the buffer can only handle holding 10 commands, right? That's not going to help Ryan. Okay. So what Ryan can do, right? Ryan can actually use, right? He can use the command terminal history size X, right? To increase, right? To increase or set the size of the buffer from the default to assist him with, managing the switch or what have you. Okay. Right. He'll be able to go ahead and see it, right? See who's it set for because you can set it per user. And then you'll actually use the command history size X to actually configure that size. right? All this together, you'll be able to see, I set the history buffer. I see how many commands my buffer can hold, which of course is into a separate part of memory, but that's not needed for the CCNA. And I can go ahead and configure it as large as I need it or how small I need it, right? So very great thing, very good thing that you would need for your, your labs and of course your production environment. Okay, let's move on. So if you look at the top of the PowerPoint, right, there's three things, right, that we're going to cover, right? And I'm going to talk your head off, okay? And we're going to go over this in the lab, right? But I just wanted to make sense of it, okay? We have the logging synchronous, we have the exec timeout, we have the no IP domain lookup, okay? Right? And so by default, right, if we, if Ryan, right, being the network administrator, he connects to, he uses a console cable to connect to the switch, right? And he's on the CLI for a while, he'll see messages pops up. Maybe he enabled an interface. Maybe he shut down an interface, right? There'll be messages that popped up while he's typing, right? That interrupts him, right? And so these are messages, which of course are called the syslog messages, right? That'll pop up, right? And it's all of it is unsolicited, right? All unsolicited. It'll just pop up, right? And it'll just show them, hey, here's, we're just letting interface is shut down or something based on the alert level, right, is configured, okay, based on your access on the switch, right? And so, by default, right, this is set to go ahead and to be able to see these messages or what have you that pops up unsolicited, right? And so, but what if, right, Ryan has to configure all, these devices, right? But he's getting mixed up, right, in his configuration because he's trying to type a long command. A syslog message popped up, right, unsolicited, right? And so they pop up, right? And he lost where he was at, right? What he can do, right? He can go ahead and disable, right, the feature of logs coming up, right, by doing maybe a command called no logging console, right? And of course, logs won't pop up while he's, of course, while he's on the CLI, right? It won't irritate him anymore. It won't pop up. It'll disable those messages, right? He'll be good to go, right? And he can just go into line configuration mode, whether it be the console or the virtual terminal lines, and put that no logging command in. Okay, but right with a lot of Cisco devices, right? No matter at what layer, right? Um, the developers that made the Cisco code, they create commands, right? They create things, right, in their software that help network administrators reach a compromise. Okay. So what do I mean by that? Right. So Ryan being a network administrator, right? So it's irritating to him for messages to pop up, right? While he's configuring it, he'll lose his place. He doesn't know where he's typing. Okay. Right. But he, you know, he doesn't want to disable entirely those syslog messages popping up because he wants to know what's going on with the switch, with the device, right? So how can we meet in the middle, right? What he can do, right? He can put a command in that says, hey, I still want you to display these syslog messages, but I just want you to do it at a little bit more of a convenient time, okay? Maybe at the end of a command, a show command that he puts in, okay? And so what he can do, right? And what enables those logs to be shown at a convenient time is using the logging sequence command, right? And so what does that do, right? This basically tells the iOS to synchronize the syslog messages, right? And display them, right? Display them, right after certain commands are done, right? Maybe after the show commands are done. So if he does a show run, maybe something was unplugged or something was shut down. That syslog message isn't going to be shown until, right? Until that show command is complete. Okay. So that's about logging synchronous, right? The next thing we need to talk about, right, is exec timeout. Okay, and I'm going to keep you guys on the screen because I want you guys to just take a look at how this is configured. Because tomorrow during lab day, we're going to go ahead and see this in live action. Okay, so another thing, right, that our network administrators and you guys being future CCNA candidates, right, can do, right, to help out, right, when you guys are working in a production environment or just testing your lab, is configuring the exec timeout command, right? And what does that do, right? And what that does, and I'm going to say it in layman's terms first, right? Let's say somebody connects to the device, right? To the switch, right? Since we're mainly talking about a switch this chapter, connects via layer 3 using either Telnet or SSH. Okay. And so let's say, one of Ryan's coworkers configuring the switch, right? But they leave out for lunch and they forget to disconnect their session, right? Well, we don't want to leave him connected, right? Because maybe he may not lock his computer and somebody may come in and do some, do things as a bad actor or a hacker, right? Right? And Ryan can't just tell people, hey, make sure you sign out. Because even, you can put all the restrictions and put all the emails out you can, people are still human. Will forget, right? So what the developers at Cisco, these great guys, what they created is this exec timeout command, right? Which after that you can put minutes and seconds, right? To where you can set, right, the length of time, right, where an activity is happening on that device to where if there is an activity, it will I want to use the right word. Um, it will close that session for that user, right? I think it's a perfect way to put it. So if Ryan puts his exec timeout for 5 minutes and his coworker left and it just hit 5 minutes without any manual interaction, he will be signed out and his session will be closed. Okay. So he can go ahead and enable that for both um, people that are console users and for people that are accessing it, that are accessing it through the virtual terminal lines. Okay. And of course, last but not least, and of course, I will show you guys the most irritating thing for a network administrator, and I'm sure you guys saw it from some of my labs that we do on Fun Day, is the no IP domain lookup commands, right? What is that, right? So, um, everybody's human, right? Everybody does a mistype, or everybody may type something wrong, right? Well, with the Cisco device, if you type something wrong, you mistype something wrong. What the Cisco device will do, right? What Cisco iOS will do is, for some reason, it thinks you want to uh, telnet to a host, right? Or look up a host by that name, right? And so with the default settings in the switch, right outside of the box, you didn't configure no IP domain lookup. What that switch is going to do, because again, it's a host, right? It's gonna go ahead, right? And I say it's a host because at this point we enabled IPv4, right? What it's going to do is it's going to look at its DNS settings and it's going to attempt to resolve that host name to an IP address, right? It's going to reach out to its DNS server, right? It's going to act just like a host. And the most frustrating thing, and of course, I'm going to show you guys because I've done this mistake. I still do it to this day. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys and make it seem like I'm a wizard. I still do it to this day. It's going to take a minute to time out. It's going to do that DNS lookup but it's legit going to take a minute to time out. And during this time, when it's, trying to do this DNS lookup, you will not have access to the CLI. So imagine Ryan, of course, configuring a switch. He, mistypes a lot of things, right? And let's say he mistypes something 4 or 5 times an hour. He's adding an extra minute for the every hour for the entire day that he has that switch, which means he's going to be working past the clock trying to configure this switch, right? So what can we do to avoid this problem, right? If you We can go ahead and put in the no IP domain lookup command, right? And what this is going to do is, of course, disable iOS from trying to resolve, a host name to an IP address. Okay. So what you see here, of course, is the template of all the commands I just spoke about, how they look, how you configure them. Um, of course, right? And let me make sure, and I'm so glad the CCNA certification guide put it in there. These commands are typically used to increase productivity in a lab, right? Because you don't want to have nothing stopping you. Maybe you have a certain amount of time to do your lab. In a production environment, you would actually set these values to a certain thing. And of course, you may leave IP domain lookup after you configure, right, IPv4, because it may need to, and it will need, let me not say it may need, with my experience, it does need to resolve host names to IP addresses, okay? And with that being said, you are complete, right? You are complete with chapter 6. I want to share my other screen. To go ahead and just to go over some things. I know you guys have the book. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Couple of things I want you guys to do, as always. Please do the chapter review, okay? Do the chapter review, and of course, this helped me with my CCNA and CCNP. Read everything, please, right? I know it's boring. Trust me, I get it. I've been there, but you need it. Take your time, right? Review the key topics, review the key terms, review the questions at the beginning of the chapter, review the config checklist, right? With the config checklist, practice them in packet tracing, right? You have labs. If you don't have labs, I will create a lab for you, okay? Just reach out to me, okay? But do all these things, okay? And if I don't give you a lab, right, be creative. You guys are going for your CCNA, right? You're going to have to be self-starters. If you see a diagram in this book, recreate it in packet tracing. You won't need me or anybody to create it for you, okay? Of course, review all the key topics, right? And what I mean by key topic, you see this little orange square here, right? Maybe next to a section throughout the entire chapter. Please go over it, okay? Go over those key terms you see here, okay? Telnet, secure shell, et cetera, et cetera. If you have the book, of course, do those labs, right, that it comes with, right? Here's a command reference, right? Go over it, of course. And this is going through everything that we saw, everything that we've done, everything that I showed you guys in Lab Fun Day, okay? With that being said, you guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.